Yeah, sometimes you get some pretty cool items down the road and you think, how did they come up with this? You don't know, but it's kind of awesome. Something I had picked up a while back was this thing from Metallica. It's basically a 3D model of the Master Puppets like cover art, and it's pretty awesome. Graveyards, the puppet hands, the puppet strings, it's like, man, I'm really happy I have this thing laying around too. But hey, collectibles. Sometimes that's what life is all about. So, on another note, welcome to yet another edition of the Wanayuki Cheese Cafe, your one-stop shop for everything about microbrews, home renovations, cooking, barbecuing, and a whole bunch of bad jokes down the road. You may laugh, you may cry, you may scratch your head in confusion, you may want to lock me up in a padded cell, and if you're feeling all of the above, then you know I've done my job properly. So before I continue on with my little shindig, I'm just going to say, don't be afraid to hit that subscribe button below, because I'm always putting together some new content for everyone to enjoy. Now, if you remember a while back, I did do a little bit of a rundown of my music collection that I picked up from over the years, and I did get a comment in the comment section about doing a second part to cover a few of the artists that I had missed. And I figured this would be a pretty good time to do a second part also, because I'm actually thinking of something as another anniversary. I dusted this off from my collection. Yeah. As I'm recording this, I'm actually approaching the 5-year anniversary since HMV, the old music store in Canada, had to close down. There's a few of them that still exist in the UK, but we're going to get to that another time. But basically, around 5 years ago today, I was working at HMV. We got the news that all of them across Canada were going to be closing. We were all put into a shock, and it was like, what the hell is going on? It's quite a big change from back then, because in my case, it was a good 7 years of my life when I was working there. And basically, for better or for worse, I was working with my hobby. It is what it is. We all moved on to something else, but I was feeling a little bit nostalgic, and I thought it was kind of appropriate to wear this if I was going to be going through the rest of the music collection. Obviously, I'm not going to cover everything because who has time for it all? But I figured I could give a few other highlights. Now, before I do that, I do feel like I need to have a good brew. And I've got me my trusty IPA glass too, that I've highlighted a few times in the last few videos, and I got the appropriate one for this. I don't think I'm going to use the music because I know I'm probably going to get blocked on YouTube, so let's go for round 2. So from Loose Brun, the Brown Bear Brewer, I've got something called a black IPA, but if you're to look at this one, clearly it's a love letter to Metallica's Black Album, the home of Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, If That's Your Style. In my case, the big tune is Sad But True. If I was to take one song off that album, that's the one for me, because it's the heaviest one. Hold on. Cue the music. Very delicious. And yeah, I'm sure you probably ask yourself, like, what does that musical selection have to do with what I'm drinking? Well, a little bit of trivia is that Metallica actually used the Ecstasy of Gold, and the Ecstasy of Gold is that scene from The Good, the Bad, the Ugly when Tuco is running around that graveyard trying to find where the gold is buried there. It's like a very mundane scene on its own, but with that music, I find it's one of those pieces that takes it to a whole other level. It just becomes a thing of beauty because of that. God rest Ennio Morricone. Great composer we lost. But yeah, Metallica used that to open a lot of their concerts back in the day, and probably still do to this day, and I thought it seemed kind of appropriate for it. But it's all good stuff, and it brings me to my first subject, and in fact the reason I'm doing this in the first place. Well, one of the main reasons that I was given this kind of request to do a second part was not just for the vast selection, but also because they want to have some Megadeth highlighted. And it kind of ties into the whole Metallica saga too, because here's how it works. Metallica. Obviously, if you're like a casual fan, you would think, obviously, the Black Album, Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, Sad But True, The Unforgiven, or whatever. And if you're a fan of the thrasher stuff, or you're there from the beginning, you'll probably think Master of Puppets. So yeah, Master of Puppets, featuring the title track. It's like a good 8.5 minutes, and one of the best songs of all time, personally speaking, because you can't really top that. And the Black Album, well, here. I'm sure there were probably Spinal Tap fans when they were coming up with this idea, taking the idea of how much more black can it be? They'd probably say none more black. But how does that tie into the Megadeth story? Well, it's easy. Before lead guitarist Kirk Hammett had joined the group, beforehand they had another guitarist by the name of Dave Mustaine, and for a couple of reasons, one or another, something about the bad temper, alcohol problem, or whatever, which is kind of hard to imagine considering that Alcoholica was one of the nicknames of the band back then. He was actually kicked out of the group and decided that he was so pissed off, he wanted to start another group to try to outtake them. That actually led to the group Megadeth. See if I can find it. They did like one album, well, a couple of albums. There's a couple of classics. For me personally, Peace Sells, But Who's Buying is one of those. With the title track, it's pretty awesome. Personally, I'd say that Devil's Island is one of my favorite tunes of all time from them, because of how heavy, thrashy it is. Of course, the other technical masterpiece would be Rust in Peace, featuring Holy Wars, Hangar 18, Tornado of Souls. It's a pretty technical album, but awesome all around too. And if you like something that's a bit more easier and accessible, then you go for Countdown to Extinction with Symphony of Destruction. Okay, I'm gonna admit I haven't heard this album in ages, so I probably need to revisit to know the tunes. Again, Symphony of Destruction is probably the best known track on this. So yeah, that's how the whole Metallica Megadeth collection came into play. It's really the genesis for how I'm doing this video in the first place. So yeah, pretty fun, and it gave me an excuse to look up a few other rarities, or other oddities, or other classics. Depends on your perspective, you know? And if I was to go for a metal approach once again, to go from Metallica and Megadeth, there is another band I could probably highlight for myself, mostly because it's one of my favorite metal albums of all time. If you're from Switzerland, or if you're kind of familiar with some earlier thrash, death, black, or whatever metal, it feels more like thrash to me. It's going to be Celtic Frost. Yeah. If any of my loyal viewers are looking at this, there's probably one who's probably going to have a spastic attack because he just hates it all. But yeah, I love it. It's very thrashy, dark, and it's got the album I want to show off is it? To Megatherion. It really doesn't get any more evil looking than this. To kind of give you an idea that it's supposed to be apocalyptic sounding, a lot of the sound is like some growls in there while singing, but it also features French horns, timpani drums, female operatic vocals to go with it. You kind of think, I'm listening to this and I got the apocalypse that's starting to approach now. Hell no. Or hell yeah, I think it's badass. But I kind of dig this. Some people will probably say that this is a bit blasphemous, but you know, it is what it is. A lot of metal bands, even if they look like this, they're not going to be taken seriously. It's so over the top that you really cannot, you know, take it tongue-in-cheek, as they would say. And if you think this style looks kind of familiar, well, it's also tied into this album by Danzig. There. How the Gods Kill. Okay, I'm kind of getting the running theme of this. But notice the artwork here is very biomechanical, I guess, of the style. Because Celtic Frost was Swiss, they actually got H.R. Geiger to do a lot of their artwork. So just in case you don't know the name by heart, that guy actually was the co-creator of the Alien, or the Xenomorph from the Alien movies. Yeah, Aliens, some of my favorite movies of all time, even if it could be a bit off-putting at times, because it's like, yeah, if you know the premise, you kind of know how bad it could get. And I got the quadrilogy here too to kind of tie it in. This is a version that has like a really messed up packaging. Because it opens up like this, but then you keep unfolding and it just, yeah, look at this. Get your 3D glasses on, everyone. Yeah, see? This is only half the length for basically a 9-disc set. I wonder, how long is this thing? Let's get some measurements done. I am going to find out for myself. The wheel, 62 inches, or 5 feet 2 inches. What were they thinking when they came up with this? Wait, hang on. Okay, 5 foot 3 inches. Christ, that's a big box. And that gives you an idea of where that artwork had come from. And I guess I could finish off with another very metal kind of record. Actually, first, why am I wearing this poncho and the hat? I guess I could get this off. I may as well just show off the shirt and not have to wear too many layers. But first, goddamn glasses. Yeah, some people say eye laser surgery would be useful, but I kind of like how I look with glasses. I ain't gonna be changing that. So yeah, that Undertaker reference you're wondering about is like, what the hell is he thinking? Well, it kind of ties into my next reference. Undertaker, wrestling, Triple H. Well, I'm sure if you're not a wrestling fan, you think, what the fuck is this guy talking about? But it does lead into one of the bands that did his theme song, Motorhead. So, if you like your classic metal, or as Lemmy had always used to call himself, just basic rock and roll because he thought metal doesn't mean a thing to him, Ace of Spades is an all-time classic from them. It's one of those that's like high adrenaline. They're acquired taste for everyone because his voice is not... it's like he probably gargled razor blades while playing at a high speed. But I'm not here to talk about just Motorhead. I'm talking about one of the bands he started to play in before he actually formed Motorhead. It was a band that was called Hawkwind. Pretty awesome if you like very psychedelic 1970s music. It's very long, jammy, pretty heavy for 1974 also. And one album of theirs I would recommend is the live album Space Ritual. Yep, pretty good stuff there too. Take note of the very psychedelic I guess new dancers with the tigers accompanying them. Yeah, apparently if you're around 1974, they were one hell of a live act to watch. Whether you're high or on something or not, I guess it depends. But it was really good stuff for me, personally. Of course, we're not here to only talk about metal because it's not the only kind of music you can find out in the stores. But we're going to kind of transition to something a little bit later. So from metal to maybe some basic hard rock. Everyone knows about Kiss. You know, guys in the makeup, rock and roll all night, Detroit Rock City. But I'm not here to talk about that. There's one album that I enjoyed from the 80s of theirs that is actually pretty interesting. Like one of the heavier Kiss albums, and it's Creatures of the Night. Let's see if I can find that here. Here we are. So something that came out in... when was it? 1982? Yeah, it's not the classic lineup with all the original four. It's still pretty solid. But there's a funny bit of trivia here. There's two songs on here that's called War Machine and Rock and Roll Hell. And two of the co-writers on there was Jim Vallance, which probably doesn't ring a bell to you, but the other one was his writing partner, Bryan Adams. So yeah, imagine that. Bryan Adams actually co-wrote some songs for Kiss. This was back before Bryan actually became a super fan, but like a superstar, like his big years. But I'm not a hard rock, I'm not a metal fan, but it's a way to get my songs heard out there. So that's how he started, before he started to get to his bigger stuff, such as, actually, since I brought it up, where are you? Yeah, Reckless. People will probably say that everything I do for you is the highlight of his career. I'd like it, but if you were to go for one Bryan Adams album, it would be Reckless. That you got One Night Love Affair, Run to You, Heaven, Somebody, Summer of '69. It's Only Love. It's Only Love was his duet that he did with Tina Turner also. So that's a nice little bit of trivia. But this was like rocker Brian that's pretty strong from start to finish. Except for Heaven, which is the one song you probably slow dance on. But I personally love this one. Really solid stuff. So yeah, we went from metal, hard rock, to Bryan Adams. The more you know. Some artists are going to really have a lot of distinguishing features, or like something that there's a sound that goes across all their albums over time. Like in the case of AC/DC, you hear one song of theirs from like 1977 or maybe 1984, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into. Other bands, you know, they have like maybe their dark side or their lighter side, and one of those examples is The Cure. One of those bands that I love too, because if you were listening to what's on the radio, you would probably think Just Like Heaven, you would think Love Song, which Adele had covered years later, or something like Friday I'm in Love. But they do have two type of styles. Like what I said for the lighter stuff, Disintegration is one of those. Actually, no, it's actually a mix of the darker stuff with some poppier moments. Poppier would be Kiss Me, Kiss Me, Kiss Me with Just Like Heaven. My personal favorite? Well, I'll be honest. I like the darker Cure stuff. I like when they're a bit more, shall we say, uneasy, maybe minor key. And any of them that go with it is like 17 Seconds with The Forest. A Forest is an all-time classic. And if you really want something dark, but don't listen to this when you're in a really downer mood, Pornography. Because I love this album, but you already know that. Okay, I'll admit, I kind of like Pornography. Don't look at me that way. I'm talking about The Cure. I swear, I gotta stop recording every burp and fart. I feel like it's gonna be insurance against me down the road. For what The Cure would have been considered, I guess back in the 80s it would have been considered alternative. It definitely would have been considered new wave. Because new wave is basically taking like the old punk from the 70s, maybe making them a bit more artsy, a little bit more keyboard centric. Lyrically I wouldn't be able to tell you because there's all sorts of stuff to that. But new wave is actually one of my favorite genres, and one of those bands I do enjoy is actually Talking Heads. Eventually what happened was, there. So on my left hand side is Fear of Light, Remain in Light, which has a song Once in a Lifetime. It's got one of the weirdest music videos ever out there, and if ever you want to see it, I'd say Google it. You'll thank me later, or you'll scratch your head like, what the hell is this song? Then the other one is Speaking in Tongues with the song Burning Down the House. That is super catchy and very bouncy, goofy, and yeah, it's definitely one of my favorites of them. Some good stuff on there, but their main guy, David Byrne, you know, he was pretty creative. And I don't know if I mentioned in my last video, and I'm not going to be checking my other footage, I might have made reference to, I would say, Brian Eno. David Byrne actually did a collaboration with him, and in fact, I think I got that album somewhere on the shelf. My Life in the Bush of Ghosts. Do ghosts have bushes? I don't know, and I'm not going to do my research on it. Yeah. Okay, this is the remastered version of it. Kind of look like this. Hang on. Yeah, the cover art is kind of small, but it's a very strange concept of an album that they had. Basically, imagine that you're taking, you know, doing this very herky-jerky, I don't know, world music with a bit of new wave, keyboard centric, and then you take samples of vocals that overlay right on that, and you kind of get that. It's like sampling before sampling was done a lot in the early days of hip hop. Now, what would you be sampling on there? Well, from what I've seen, you could sample like radio recordings about some politician who's admitting to a mistake and trying to weasel himself out of a situation, Lebanese wordless vocals, maybe an exorcism, crazed preachers. But yeah. It's really weird to think about sampling this kind of stuff, but somehow they overlay into the music and it's like, it actually fits pretty well. Again, it's not for everyone, but if you're into this kind of weird, trippy, or hard to listen to stuff, it's definitely a recommended one too. And if you're wondering about my wrestling thing, well, I grew up in the 90s also. I was an Attitude Era fan thanks to some kids in school wearing those Stone Cold Steve Austin shirts. So that was like my peak fandom of wrestling, and obviously I collected a lot of the stuff, VHSs of old events, and even like music too for... Where is it? Yeah. Some music which has the entrance themes of some of the wrestlers when they came out to start their matches. Some classics, some cheese obviously, because, you know, 80s, 90s, there is a lot of cheese in there. Can't really help that. And then the thought has occurred to me before about, if you're thinking of a universal kind of music, like something that almost everyone on the planet could enjoy, I'm sure that people would agree with me, but that would be Motown. Because everyone I've met, I have never met anyone that has hated Motown, and I don't think anyone ever has a bad thing to say about it. Because, I mean, you got a lot of these classics from Smokey Robinson, The Supremes, who else? Mary Wells, You Beat Me to the Punch. Oh, that's a pretty good one. Early Stevie Wonder. Yeah, Motown is one of those that musically, stylistically, it's one of those that no matter what you heard, they have a very identifiable sound. And apparently it's because they were based in Detroit that Motown was kind of a play on the phrase Motortown. Like, the way that they produced music was a bit like how you produce a car factory. You got your lyricists, songwriters, your choreographers, your fashion designers. Like, it almost felt like a bit of an assembly line in a way. But it was something that a lot of people did enjoy at the time. A lot of classics, very innocent. It's like, it's hard to find anyone who's gonna be pissed off listening to Motown. I can't complain about that. Of course, Motown had a distinguished sound, and even though they continued on till the latter day, some artists actually stayed with Motown but then broke away from that sound. I don't think anyone could have been a better example of that than Stevie Wonder. Like, Everything's Alright, Uptight, or My Cherie Amour, those are classics from the younger Stevie Wonder days, and it's almost hard to believe that he was a kid when he was recording that too. Yeah, so much talent in such a young age. Then, eventually in the 70s, he realized that he had this music that he wanted to record himself, and he's one of those that he was on Motown, or Tamla, like one of the labels that was affiliated with it, but he basically broke away from that. Starting with The Music of My Mind, Talking Book, which is the home of You Are the Sunshine of My Life, and Superstition. Superstition? Yeah, Superstition. Inner Visions, with the song Higher Ground, which most of you probably know because it was covered by the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the 90s, on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers soundtrack no less. There's some trivia for you. And then one of my personal favorites, fulfilling this is first finale, as if there's going to be another finale that comes after that. Too Shy to Say, Boogie on Reggae Woman, Creepin'. It's a very mellow, very nice, soothing record. Almost romantic in some ways, too. The only one of this classic period I don't have is Songs in the Key of Life. And I feel like I'm doing myself a disservice, or I'm doing myself injustice for not having that. So yeah, Stevie Wonder is one of those guys that he was Motown, but he did a lot more to it than that. And then the other big artist who had done more for Motown was Marvin Gaye. In fact, I got another one here I could show off. Obviously, if you're thinking Marvin Gaye, you would probably think like, you know, Ain't No Mountain High Enough, I Heard Through the Grapevine. And then from his latter years, you would probably think Sexual Healing, Let's Get It On. Kind of a horny bastard, wasn't he? But I gotta digress. Let me just find this one other album. Gabriel. There we are. Marvin Gaye, What's Going On? Like one of the first concept albums off the Motown label. I guess the basic concept of this is that the Vietnam veteran or some war veteran comes back home and finds the whole world has changed around him too. So lyrically there's a lot going on here, but when you listen musically, it does have a lot of the key, like the old Motown trademarks there. So it's like kind of a cross between the old style and then the style that's probably going to be coming a bit more with those artists that were looking for more creative freedom. Awesomeness all around. Of course, Motown wasn't the only label that was big on soul music back in the 60s and 70s, or maybe even the 50s. Another one of the big ones was Stax Records. Them you probably wouldn't know by name because of the label, but they actually had a lot of good stuff. And there, Stax 50th Anniversary Edition here. 2 CDs worth of the hits. And I know you're probably thinking, like, who was on Stax? Well, if I was to give you the names and artists of a few of them, you would know. So one of the big classics is Booker T and the MGs, Green Onions. Yeah, that's a musical. And if you're a 90s kid, you watched The Sandlot, you probably remember that tune from that movie. Then there's a lot of Sam and Dave. Hold On, I'm Coming, Soul Man. There's what was the other one on here again? Yeah, I'll probably find it later on. Knock on Wood by, I think it's Eddie Floyd? Yes, it is. I remember that. One of the other big songwriters over here was Isaac Hayes. And he did have a solo career in the 70s with a lot of like long winding jams. But you would probably know him well for the theme from Shaft. You know, they say this guy Shaft is a bad mother. Shut your mouth. But I'm talking about Shaft. And we can dig it. Yeah, you're welcome. Old soul classic. And then if you went into the 90s, he did have a career renaissance by voicing Chef in South Park. And eventually sang the song Chocolate Salty Balls. Yeah, so think about this guy. Theme from Shaft. And because I watched Escape from New York a little while ago, I remember him as one of the bad guys in that movie. And then eventually, Chef singing about sucking on his chocolate salty balls. You're welcome, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that little bit of trivia. Rufus Thomas, the Funky Chicken. Yeah, do the Funky Chicken. Gobble yourself to no end. Oh, and how could I forget the other one? Otis Redding was on this label too. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was his biggest hit, but it became a posthumous hit after he died in a plane crash, I believe. But a really good artist, and had a lot more influence on later artists than you expected. So who would have been one of those artists that Otis Redding had influenced? Well, here's an idea that you probably didn't know if you're not a huge follower of a lot of music. One of his biggest influences was on Peter Gabriel. That's right, that Peter Gabriel. But it kind of makes sense. Well, first off, I do have over here one of my favorite little box sets was the early Genesis albums when Peter Gabriel was their lead singer. And on this album is one of those that Phil Collins was on here, but he was only the drummer, not the singer. Yep, that's right. Phil Collins, that pop superstar a lot of people took as a sacrilege, like the worst person ever on the planet, for a reason I'm not going to understand, was just a drummer. And one hell of a drummer too. But anyways, Peter Gabriel was a singer at this time with a lot of very flashy, weird outfits, like dressed up as a knight, dressed up as a flower, or whatever the fuck that thing is. You make up your own judgment on that. But anyways, listen to some of his phrasing. You could kind of tell he was into the old soul music when he was growing up. But Otis Redding was one of his biggest influences. Because I find that he has a lot of similar phrasings or similar ways of singing to him. And I almost feel like he kind of carried that into his solo career too, after he had left Genesis. Actually, his solo career went a little bit darker. But look at it this way. When you have an album cover that looks kind of like this, where half your face is melting, well, it's not exactly going to be a cheerful kind of record. You kind of know what you're getting yourself into. But then I suppose that in some ways, depending on how you look at it, that kind of album was the reason he left Genesis, because there's no way he would have come up with that kind of music on his own. But that's not to say that Phil Collins doesn't have his moments. Like, again, a lot of people probably bash the guy for being a pop superstar, or feels like he personally took Genesis and made him a commercial vehicle for himself. While they kind of eventually did go commercial, everything I learned or know about them is that it was a band effort, especially because one of the members was so stubborn as a mule that nothing would have got done without his okay on it. So it wasn't all Phil's fault. But even then, Phil's pop, it does have its moments, even if it wasn't really pop. Because I guess the biggest example I could think about is his first solo album, Face Value. This is actually the album where In the Air Tonight comes from. If you remember my previous video on my beer haul when I had a perfect beer for air drum into it, and if you don't remember, then there's a card right in the top right corner you can click on and watch that once again. But once again, this is an album he did like when he was in the process of getting his going through his first divorce. So at the time he wasn't thinking about a pop hit or wasn't thinking about getting top 20, getting the best selling record. It was just, I had my kids, I had my wife, now they both left me, or they all left me, so I need something to ease my mind or something to take his mind off of it. It was just record whatever, and suddenly became a hit, and it's like, holy shit. Yeah. That's how his first solo record had gotten started, even with some of his other collaborations. Actually, and speaking of collaborations, he was a drummer for another jazz fusion band called Brand X from the album Unorthodox Behavior. Yeah, unorthodox, isn't it? Unorthodox is like the key phrase of the day. I'm sorry, I was also kind of getting sidetracked thinking back to the film American Psycho. That one scene kind of made me think twice about Phil Collins also. Not because of him, just because somebody else put it into another context. I'm thinking, yeah, I'm not going to hear the song the same way now. It's a little bit like the song Stuck in the Middle with You. You hear that after seeing Reservoir Dogs, you're just going to imagine some guy tied to a chair while getting his ear chopped off. Yeah, if you haven't seen the film, I guess you can watch if you want, and thank me later. Or throw a rock at me, or throw an extra aged piece of cheddar at me. I don't care. Whatever the case, that was one of the popular things I guess I could have covered. But there's also other stuff too, like... actually, this is a good example. Something that covers all types of people and tastes. No matter what, I'm sure that despite whatever your taste is, everyone probably owned at one point in their lives a copy of Bob Marley and the Wailers' Greatest Hits, Legend. This is one of those that, again, no matter what you like, it's something that speaks to everyone, it's easy to enjoy, plus it's a summertime record. It's really hard to feel down and out when you're playing this in the sun, while maybe on the side of the pool, and possibly drinking some pina colada. Hopefully not getting caught in the rain. And because it's me, I wouldn't be doing this justice if I wasn't thinking of a Simpsons reference. If you remember that, you probably think the song Jammin', and you imagine Chief William just butchering the song to no end too. Yeah, that's a case of someone butchering a song, but I still love it no matter what. And I guess I could come up with some other weird trivia too, because I'm starting to run out of time, but there's always plenty of material to work with. I do have some unusual things that you will find over here. In fact, some people would say she's so unusual. And by which I mean Cyndi Lauper. You know, girl just want to have fun, money changes everything, time after time. Her very first album, for a lot of people, one of her best. And yeah, I love this kind of stuff too. I give everything a shot. The funny thing too is that you can connect her to wrestling and to Nintendo of all things too. So here's the example. She did her solo album, but she kind of got some fame while pairing up with Captain Lou Albano in the old WWF games, the old WWF days. Yeah, I know, WWF means something completely different, but to me, it's always going to be wrestling, or maybe a panel like that. But yeah, paired with Captain Lou Albano, who was a manager at the time, but Captain Lou Albano was also the guy who played Mario in the old Super Mario Bros. Super Show too. So that's another part of the childhood I remembered as a kid. And I knew that guy before I knew wrestling. Yeah, crazy, isn't it? And so I guess I could be coming to a wrap very soon at... Oh, yeah. Guy posing nude with the Canada logo. Yeah, Devin Townsend's one of those guys from Vancouver that he's pretty much all over the map in terms of musical styles. Overproduced. Well, I mean, very... how can I say this? Like, very thick layer productions, very metal. Go from kind of screamo to very high operatic stuff. It's almost like... I guess his production is kind of like a modern-day Frank Zappa because of how much is going on in his music. Yeah, one of my favorites I discovered too, all because I got the first Dropping a Lad album for $2 a while back, thanks to a recommendation from an old colleague at the HMV. I guess the bottom line here is that no matter how old you are, There's always going to be new music to discover, new stuff that's coming out in the latter times, but then sometimes there's always old music that will just click with you at the right time frame. Or I guess when you're old enough to appreciate it. Frankly, a lot of the stuff I have here, I would not have appreciated in the old days. Back when I had my hardcore progressive rock, and if it's not deep, it's not good music phase. Now it's like, if it sounds good to me, I love it. And you can't really change anything about that. So I guess I could start wrapping things up and hitting the old dusty road again. So, thanks for watching this other edition of the One Yuki Cheese Cafe, musical Yuki style. So if you like what you see, don't forget to hit that subscribe button below and give me a thumbs up, possibly 2 thumbs up, because hey, I try to be awesome that way for everyone. And if you have any other ideas for future episodes, leave me a comment in the obvious comment section, and then I'll see what I could do. Have a good evening, everyone, and happy anniversary, HMV. Hard to believe, 5 years. Where does the time go? Yeah, this is actually pretty cozy. I think I could get used to this.